Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Willow Center podcast. This is Season 4, Episode 10. My name is Chase Cotton. I'm the Community Director here at the Willow Center in Brownsburg, Indiana, along with my co-host.
I'm Mason. I am the Operations Director here at the Willow Center.
Thanks so much for tuning in for another episode. So last month, we celebrated Recovery Month all month long in coordination with National Recovery Month celebrations all across the country. And you had the chance to hear from one of our clients, and I think that testimony was a really powerful one.
Yeah, it was.
But this month, we're back to sort of our regularly scheduled programming, jumping into another interesting topic, and Mason and I are going to discuss that here shortly. So this month's topic is service, and it's an important one. And I know we say that every time, but it really is. It's an important topic, and I want to make sure that that we give it justice. So to kick us off, I wanted to share a quote from actress Audrey Hepburn. You know, the Breakfast at Tiffany's. You've probably seen pictures of her. She's like quintessential old Hollywood, but she has this to say about service. You have two hands, one to help yourself, the second to help others.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. How do you feel about that quote?
I like that a lot. I think that it just really encapsulates. I think what it encapsulates is something that we miss a lot with service, which is helping ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, like when you think of people who are service oriented, most of the time you think of the person who's always going out of their way for someone else.
Right.
But for people to do that takes so much self-work. You have to do a lot of self-care on your downtime to be able to be that person all the time.
For sure. And it reminds me of some of those other old adages, like you can't pour out from an empty cup, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So thanks, Audrey Hepburn, wherever you are in the universe. All right, so let's just go ahead and dive in. We've got a few discussion questions to kind of guide our conversation today about service. And you may find that you have some questions that come up within you when you're listening or viewing, whether that's on YouTube or your other favorite streaming app. Feel free to shoot us an email or leave us a comment when you see this get posted, what questions you have. We'll try to answer those, or maybe we can incorporate them to the next episode. So to kick things off, what role did service play in your life growing up, Mason?
That's a good question. I would say service was kind of integral to my life growing up.
Oh, yeah?
Growing up in a family full of adopted children, I got to see what it was like to see service lived out every day, you know? Just even being in the realm of fostering an adoption is a service. And so I got to see the pain of service sometimes, which is like when most of the time people are not just serving, right? You're putting your heart out there,
right?
Many times, whether that be helping at a homeless shelter, fostering children, fostering animals, no matter where it is, there's some heart component to that.
Yeah.
And it's great because you can be filled up, but there's also some hardship that can come depending on what happens while you're helping.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me, so I grew up both as a person of faith as well as in scouting. I was a Cub Scout since kindergarten and made it all the way to Eagle. Rah, rah, if there are any Eagles watching. And so there was a multitude of ways in which service both naturally and programmatically showed up in my life as a kid. Of course, you know, in the church, and I was raised in a Christian tradition, we had regular opportunities to serve, whether that was, you know, through food drives and coat drives and, being able to do, after storm cleanup type relief, or, there was some shut-ins that were part of the congregations that would go, clean up their yards in the autumn time when they had leaves and limbs down, stuff like that.
Right.
And more programmatically speaking, in scouting, I mean, there was elements of service that were required for every rank. So in order to progress it all through the system of scouting, you had to have so many hours of community service. Right. And it was just kind of built into, the culture of scouting itself. But there was also a lot of, there's a lot of learning involved in that. A lot of it was experiential service where, you're getting the opportunity to kind of cut your teeth with leadership skills and managing a team of volunteers and doing projects for your community that are a little bit above and beyond the normal, service project. So it was a big role in my young life, I believe.
And so I'm curious, what do you think that you got to learn from your experience scouting while you were growing up, scouting or in your faith tradition?
There's a couple different things I've learned. I think from the faith tradition, and I may wax poetic here just for a moment, so bear with me, viewers and listeners. From a faith tradition standpoint, I think I learned that service very much is the physical living out of your belief. Right? I've heard it summarized, and dare I say, I may claim this as my central virtue or my central core value as a living human being. What you do is what you believe. And I believe that with all my heart. So if what you do is service, if what you do is taking care of yourself and taking care of others out of that pot, I think that is a very clear indicator of where your heart is, spiritually speaking.
Yeah.
In scouting, kind of like I mentioned before, it was a lot more skills development based, right? So, of course, there's always going to be needs in the community, but like the way the scouts did it was almost incentivizing the service with leadership skill development and with learning opportunities. So, like for example, for like the Eagle Scout rank, they require you, in order to achieve that, to find sort of like a unique need to a part of your community that you are an active participant in, and develop a project to meet that unique need, and then lead a team of scouts to complete that project over the course of several weeks to several months. Mine was building a playground for one of the churches in our community. That was seeing an uptick in like young families with kids, and they needed a place where the kids could be safe and nearby and hang out during gatherings and service projects and things like that. So, it took 3 or 4 months of planning, and like project management and planning was not a skill set I had as a 16-year-old in high school.
Really?
Right?
Surprised.
So that was an opportunity to really dig into what that means and how you do it well. And then the actual couple of days of the service, it was a Saturday and a Sunday, 8 hours of work, cutting lumber, measuring, task delegation. I mean, it was a very hands-on sort of management experience that most 16-year-olds are not getting. And I value that to this day, and it left a huge imprint on me as a person. But how about you? What do you feel like were some of the main takeaways growing up in your family that, a family that was so active in both adoption and fostering?
Oh, man. Well, I would say that one of my main takeaways would be that, I kind of tie it back into what I said at the beginning, which is like when you serve out of love, it is not, people often talk about how much you get filled up by service.
Sure.
But when done in a way that you are living it out all the time, it can be draining. It really can be. And so I think that it really showed me the importance of self-care as well as service. Because as somebody who has went through ups and downs in life, which everyone has, I know. But like in my own personal experience, right, when I am doing my best is when I am serving others and performing proper self-care.
Yeah, you need both and.
Yeah, because if I'm just serving, then I'll burn out quickly. And if I'm just doing self-care, then there's a loss of meaning in that.
Yeah.
And so I think back growing up, I created a group in my high school, and being able to lead that group and put together this, it was a lot of work, but to be able to serve in that way was at one point in my life where I was like, I felt healthy, I felt good, I felt connected. And then that group fell apart right as I started to not take care of myself as much, you just like, things get busy, life gets busy, you have so many things going on, especially in high school, and then it just all kind of falls apart, Right. But I think that's true for a high schooler as well as for people. I bet anyone in any age range could relate to that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's zoom in on now. Are there any service activities that you're participating in now as an adult, and why are you, if there are any?
So I am currently not actively participating in service activities that repeat, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to turn down a service opportunity if
Sure,
it comes
yeah.
up, right? But I'm not a part of any groups or organizations which require regular service, I would say.
Yeah.
But when I have the opportunity to, I always remember how much I enjoy it.
Yeah.
It is in the group that I run here, I often share this quote, which is, what therapy is it's reminding you of what you already know.
Mm-hmm.
You come to therapy every week to be reminded to do deep breathing, to reach out to the people you care about, to just perform these actions that we all know we need, but we just forget all the time. And service is one of those activities for me that I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I do it, and this is great. And then it'll be 4 months.
Yeah, sure.
But
I don't think there's anything wrong with service being opportunistic. I also think you raised an interesting point in that a lot of us have a tendency to assume that service is only legitimate if it is like for a volunteer organization or your place of worship or whatever. I don't think that's true. I think service is much more a worldview than anything else, right? And some of us, both of us included, quite literally, have the blessing of an opportunity to serve with our vocation.
Right.
Not to say that there are certain vocations that aren't service oriented. I think every vocation is a service in some way, but especially when it comes to like healthcare, like that's also 40 to 50 to more hours per week, depending on what's going on, that you are still actively serving your community and your team. And I think that's characteristic of someone who is looking to serve the world around them, as opposed to just looking to make money, for example.
Right. Well, and I would say that although I'm not a part of an organization, I look at my service as offering either food or friendship or money or whatever like if I have friends or family in need at that moment, to be able to reach out and offer support in that moment. That's how I would say that I perform my service outside of work.
I can vouch for that. He's helped me a few times as well.
Yeah, you too. But that's not something that you would, even saying it out loud feels weird,
Sure.
But how about you? Do you have any service activities that you participate in now as an adult?
Yeah. So, I am a member of a few different like nonprofit boards, and board leadership is like not necessarily the type of service that comes to mind again when you think of those like stereotypical things, but I have found myself in opportunities and in friendships where I've been asked to be part of these things where we are trying to start a movement or a campaign or start some sort of new organization that's going to try and do service work, where it's all of the back end stuff that you don't know is part of it.
Right.
So oftentimes what that looks like experientially for me is like I'll end up building a website or helping with branding design or writing of our bylaws, or I'll help lead meetings with the other volunteers just to try and like get the process started.
Right.
One that I'm really excited about is a newer effort called Mejorando Juntos Indiana, which is Spanish for Better Together. And it's a new sort of grassroots nonprofit organization that a couple of my friends who are both immigrants from Spanish-speaking countries in South America, they are very keenly aware of a need in their community.
Right.
One in which they made me more aware and educated me on, where a lot of families that are immigrating to the United States have aging parents that are struggling and will never be fully legal citizens because of their age, right? They either will never have the opportunity to learn English and then subsequently pass, the only the citizenship that's only offered in the English language citizenship test, or they might get, a family-based green card, but that'll never be good enough to get them on, some sort of healthcare plan, and so they're paying out of pocket for all their medical needs, and it's like there's all these very unique issues that come with having an aging parent. But having an aging parent that's not a U.S. citizen and cannot speak English is incredibly isolating for these families. So Mejorando Juntos is going to be like a support group system and network of older adults that are Spanish-speaking, supporting each other, connecting them. So I'm really excited about that service opportunity. And it was more opportunistic, right? It just I had dinner with my friends, and they were like, "This is a huge need, right?" Including for their family. And I was like, "Well, why don't we do something about it?" You know, like we're all passionate. Like let's do something, right? I'll use my skill set, you use yours, and now we're getting ready to apply for some grant funding and get our 501c3, and yeah, it's gonna be neat.
That's awesome. That's so exciting. And I think that is like the homegrown local, like what I was saying, that like I'm literally just help my friends when they need it.
Yeah.
The organizational, like you were talking about, building something to help a wider community is incredibly important. And then I just don't want to pass over kind of the softball here, which is the people that go out every single week and then are actually in those meetings,
right?
You know, who are actually like serving the food, if it is like serving the homeless, if it, like depending on whatever it is, right? Like the people who are out boots on the ground, which is a whole other type of service, which is that can be especially tough to be a part of, right?
Yeah, and honestly, there's a place for everyone. You know, whether you're more like leadership oriented like I am, or whether you're more of a boots on the ground type, and you're like, I just want to put soup in cups, man. Like I really want to stack boxes.
Yes.
Like I can do that for hours and feel great about it. You know, like there are places and organizations where you can do that. And you know, maybe in the show notes or something, we could link some of our favorite local organizations that you might consider volunteering with. But something you've mentioned a couple of times now is sort of the way you feel when you're surfing, and how sometimes you forget how good it feels.
Yes.
So I want to dive into that a little bit. How would you, I guess, give us more detail about what serving others feels like, right? In addition to what you've hinted at, like it requires self-care. Yes, it drains your energy, but like what other feelings come up during some of the most recent opportunities you've had to serve?
You know, for me, it especially in the preparation of serving, there is like an excitement and a love that can kind of fill you. And by preparation for serving, I mean whether that's leaving a card for somebody or making a meal for somebody or whatever that looks like. The build up to it is you get this anticipatory, like, oh man, like I'm actually going to get to help somebody. And like, I don't know how that works neurochemically, but I know that it feels good.
Right.
And for me, I would say it kind of presents as excitement. Also, fun fact, excitement and anxiety present pretty similarly.
That's true.
So if you are about to go help somebody and you are like, oh man, I'm feeling a little anxious about it. It could be anxiety, or it could just be your body being like, so like amped up about getting to help somebody.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Which, especially if you're first time serving anywhere, it is anxiety producing, but it's probably also exciting. So it's like a weird mix. It's a weird mix.
Yeah.
But then also just the love, you know, I feel like I would say I don't feel loved. I feel loving in that moment when I get to prepare a meal for somebody, you know, like just in that moment, you're just like, I am getting to outpour. And like, that's just,
there's nothing else that compares to it, really.
No.
I think oftentimes I feel a lot of gratitude when I have the opportunity to serve. Because I guess like, well, one, not everybody gets the opportunity to pour out in that way. You know, but two, I also know what it's like to receive.
Yeah.
You know, I've been down and out before, so like when I have someone who's serving me, you know, of course you feel abundant gratitude. Some folks might even feel a little shame depending on what's going on. But when I get to serve, then, you know, having been on both sides of that equation, I feel gratitude because, you know, that the folks I'm serving or the people that I get to work with or spend time with during that service opportunity are pouring as much into me as I am to them, regardless of whether, you know, which direction the money or time or energy is flowing.
Right.
Like it is a mutually beneficial experience. So,
and I think one thing I want to hit on with this too is a lot of people, a lot of adults, especially in America, but I'll even make it more specific and say Indiana. A lot of adults really struggle to find community after you get out of high school, college, or wherever you were, right? Maybe it's you moved out of the town that you lived in growing up. Whatever that looks like for you, service is such an awesome, awesome way to get connected to a good community.
Yeah, that's a great point, man.
And it's like, a lot of people say, like, oh, you kind of have to pay for friendship in adulthood, whether it be like joining a gym or but service, you don't. You really don't.
Good point. Yeah, I love that. That's a great point. So we already talked about some sort of lessons that we've learned in childhood based on some of the service we grew up in. But do you feel like there are any more longer lasting, lifelong type lessons that moments of service or opportunities of being served have taught you?
I would say a life lesson that service has taught me would be, that's a good question. I would say it kind of ties back to gratitude, like you were just talking about. At least for me, I would say that it taught me to be grateful for the little things.
Yeah.
Because I think it can be easy, especially in long-term relationships. I mean, family, romantic relationship, friendships, whoever, right?
Yeah.
It can be so easy for us to overlook the small things people do for us. That quick message, that quick hug, whatever that is.
Those are all acts of service as well.
That's an act of service, right? And when I remember that, which is not as often as I would like, but when I do, I think of the fact that they thought of me and they performed an action to make me happy.
Yeah.
Like to do something for me, even a small action. And like that is like, I can get sappy. So that can be that, like when I think of it like that, I'm like, oh man, like that's even thinking of you and doing something because of it. I mean, like that is so powerful.
For sure.
Because that's stepping outside of yourself, which seems small. But then I think of how many months I'll go without, with like being more self-serving than I should be.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I would say it's there's a lot of gratitude in it.
Yeah, I dig that, man. Appreciate it.
How about you?
I think for me, one big life lesson came sort of shortly after college in my first, big boy job, if you will. I was working for an organization, a nonprofit organization that did a lot of grant making internationally, especially in times of crisis or natural disaster. And they would raise money in the States and send that money, strategically with partners that were in those areas of the world that were experiencing hardship.
Yeah.
And part of my job was to go to those areas of hardship and take as much photography and videography as I could to bring it back and report on how those projects are progressing and more or less use those stories and those images to raise more funds for the next thing that happens.
Yeah.
And what I learned in that, I think it was twofold. One is the moment you try to serve others for their clout, the service itself starts to lose value. Because something I personally witnessed on the other end of my lens, when I was toting around this camera in the middle of the bush in hard to reach India or, in Podunk, middle of nowhere, Haiti, like the first thing I noticed was that people did not like necessarily being on camera all the time, especially in their moments of hardship.
Right.
And then many times they felt like they were being made out to be zoo animals for the rest of the rich, less unfortunate world or whatever.
Right.
And I had never anticipated that. Right. Like I was just trying to I was trying to help. I was trying to help them have a voice or really lift their voice to an audience they might not otherwise reach in order to bring more funding to their community and help. But in those micro interactions, it was like, why are you filming me? Like please just just hold my hands, was sort of like the perspective that I got most often. So clout is kind of a ruiner, because even if it's perceived clout, right? If it's like the clout of this story being popular and like me being responsible for telling this story to raise all this money, right? Like, even if it's just perceived and is not intended, that starts to make the service lose value. I think the other lesson there is that you may not always get the affirmation or appreciation that you deep down desire, right? And that's okay, and you have to be okay with that, right? Because I think in a lot of, especially in that job, we were helping people in the worst season of their lives. They'd lost their homes, they'd lost their everything, family members, food sources of income, just absolutely destitute. Like, they were not in good moods. Right? Like, they were grateful that we would provide this or that, right? But there was also moments of like real difficulty in communication and organization and trying to figure this out in a way to really help their community to the best of our abilities, where we left feeling like, I don't know if we did any good. We might have done more harm by coming, and on down the line, years after that, we can see the investment in the community helped, and they've rebuilt, and it was a catalyst to helping them take the next healthiest step for their community or whatever. But in those moments, there was not high fives, hugs, and handshakes all the time. Sometimes there were, but a lot of times it was like go home, like leave us alone. Like, how do we know we can trust you? Like that kind of thing, where like it's not always what you're going to expect. And I think it's important to prepare yourself for that, depending on what avenue of service that you're going into.
And I think that another key in what you were saying about the clout and the fact that you might not be appreciated as you feel you should be is a big piece of service is just being present. Right? Like, if you are in it because you have extra, like obviously, like, having money and giving money helps. That's super helpful.
Sure.
That is amazing. And handing out food is helpful, and that people appreciate that, right? But if you are in a place where you are serving, and you can not only do that, but you can do that and be present with the human being in front of you, that is where you go from serving to making an impact. And you can make an impact in other ways too, right? But that can really impact that individual's life who's in front of you.
Absolutely. And the impact moment does not have to be captured on camera. So keep your phones in your pockets, please. So in your experience, what role does service play in one's mental health or recovery journey, to make it more specific to the Willow Center's context?
Yeah, so I think that when we look at it from a recovery standpoint, the majority of the recovery community has some service aspect built into it. When you look at AA, NA, Celebrate Recovery, any of the step programs, really, the final step is giving back, right? You restart, but you also take on a sponsee and you give back to the community that helped you.
Right.
And so I think it's integral for many of them. I think also it's a good way to gauge where you're at in your sobriety or recovery. What I mean by that is, if you are hitting 2 or 3 years of sobriety and recovery, and it is still all about you and you getting better, and you've not started to look outward yet, then that shows that maybe there is still a lot of work to do.
Sure.
But it also might show you are not doing the work that you need to be doing to keep progressing.
Sure.
Because the interesting thing is you can be sober and not progressing.
Right.
White knuckling, if you will, right?
Yeah, sobriety is not the same as recovery.
Right. But when you really start to enter recovery, then you start to pick back up these things. And by the time you are picking back up hobbies, and then by the time you start getting free time again in recovery, that might not be till a year in. So it might be another year after that. It might be 2 years in where you really start to have the opportunity to even start to serve.
Right.
And so I don't want to down on anyone who is a year and a half into sobriety and recovery, and it's like, I'm not serving yet. That means it's bad. No. you're probably okay.
You're taking literal steps in that right direction.
You're taking literal steps. But I would say as you start to get to the 2, 3, 3.5 year mark, it's like, okay, well, you are getting poured into a lot still, but your sobriety is not a cruise ship, right? It's a battleship. We're taking ground. And so you got to start manning your station a little bit.
Oh, I appreciate that metaphor. That's cool.
And you start out in the infirmary, right? And you got to get better.
Yeah.
But eventually you got to get back on deck.
Right. Yeah, that's a great metaphor. I think from the mental health perspective, we already hinted at some of the feel-good chemicals that are released when you do things that provide you pleasure. And service has been proven in research to provide the brain with triggers to release dopamine and in particular oxytocin, which is that connection chemical that we experience when we're interacting with someone we love or someone that we're giving to or they're giving back.
Right.
And that face-to-face interaction. So building in regular opportunities to serve in particular can be a preventative mental health measure. Right. Boosting your levels of dopamine in healthy ways and your opportunities to connect with oxytocin can help prevent things like depression and anxiety, or at the very least can help manage some of the severity of those types of symptoms if you already experience them regularly. So finding a simple way to give back is great. And it doesn't have to be, again, like it doesn't have to be, just with, state secretary approved 501c3 organization, right? It could be just picking up trash on your street once a week when you go to walk your dog, right? It could be joining the PTO organization at your kid's school and volunteering to do a meal for the teachers once a semester or something. It's really simple, easy things that can help boost some of those good chemicals in your brain.
Let me give an example. Let me give you a hard example. All right. Okay. So I'm on this health kick and I'm like, I'm going to start doing well because I want to feel mentally well, right? So I start journaling, and then I'm journaling, and then I'm meditating, and then I'm journaling, and then I'm meditating, and then I'm reading, and I'm doing all this, and then I start exercising, and I am going all out, right? I'm eating healthy. I am doing it. And this is not to lose weight, right? This is genuinely for mental wellness.
Sure.
So I'm doing all this healthy stuff. And I still am I'm doing well, but I'm not where I want to be.
Sure.
And I can tell that there's some mental block in my brain still. I don't know what it is. And it's because I was spending all of my self-care time on me, which was important because I needed to build those habits and skills, but I was missing a whole piece of the equation.
Yeah.
And so I eventually started when I got in my car every day, I just thought to myself, who am I going to connect with today? And it's kind of an act of service because I'm thinking of somebody else and I'm saying, it's not connecting for me. It's just connecting. I want to make somebody feel cared about today.
Right.
And so I did that. It was the exact puzzle that I needed to fit into my puzzle, into the puzzle. It finished the picture for me.
I appreciate that.
And so I still tried to exercise, but my exercise actually decreased. My journaling decreased a little bit because I was interacting with people more.
Yeah.
But in that service, it finished the picture.
Yeah, I love that, man. Thanks for sharing that example. So let's go ahead and land the plane then. If you could share one piece of advice that is service related for, in particular, maybe someone who has been struggling with their mental health and they're looking for a way to get that boost, right, by serving others, by plugging in with their community, or maybe someone who is, maybe they're just a few months into their sobriety and recovery, or maybe they're at that 2-3 year mark and they're really feeling that draw to start turning the equation and giving back. What advice would you give them?
So the NA meditation book, I think it's One Day at a Time or Just for Today, one of those. I read this quote. It was back in September during one of the groups I was running, and it said, the cure for depression, and it's being facetious here, right? But the cure for depression is to actively think every day of one way you can bring someone else real joy. So the cure for depression is to bring someone else real joy every day. And so obviously there's a whole bunch more in depression, right? There's chemical component. There's all this other stuff, right? That's not technically true.
Right.
But the heart of it, which is it doesn't have to be deep service, it doesn't have to be intense service, but if every single day you can wake up and you can think of someone else outside of you and how you are going to bring them joy, that is the start to serving someone else. That can be family, that can be friends, that can be whoever you want it to be.
Yeah.
But how can you bring them real joy through service? And I think that's a great place to start.
Absolutely. Dig it.
So, how about you? You got any pieces of advice possibly?
Yeah, sure. I think I would say if you're not sure where to start in particular, consider what brings you joy and what is within your skill set. Right. One area of service that I never expected to turn into an area of service is music for me. So those who I work with know I'm a jazz trumpet player is one of my hobbies. And I love that. You know, it brings me a lot of joy to play music, and I especially like to be paid to play that music, you know, at a restaurant or, you know, a wedding or whatever. However, I've had the opportunity to do some like just free gigs, if you will. Like I've got a friend of mine that works at the Hendricks County Senior Services, and they were doing an art fair for their seniors. So I was like, let me come give you an hour and a half of music, right?
Yeah.
That'll be a donation. And that was so much fun, right? The seniors were dancing, and like it's the only audience that actually knows the words to the songs I'm playing from the 40s and 50s. So it's like they're singing along. That was awesome. I've got another nonprofit gig coming up here in a couple of weeks just for a friend of mine. And it was like, hey, we're desperate for some entertainment, but we don't have any budget. I was like, I got you. You know, it's like, it's something that already brings me joy. That's already a skill set of mine where I'm able to just use that in a way to serve others, and I believe you have that too. So whether you're viewing or listening in today, think about what is it that's uniquely you, right? Maybe it's something artistic like that, or maybe it's more leadership based. Maybe you're great at running meetings. Maybe you are a really good typer, and you could be a secretary for a few hours for one of the CASA organizations or one of the local shelters that needs front desk support, or like whatever it is. Like, find that thing that's unique to you and start there with looking for your service opportunities.
Or maybe it's that you love to play baseball or basketball or skateboard, and you're sober, and you have a hard time finding anyone else sober who does any of those activities.
Yeah.
Maybe it's going and playing a pickup game at a rec center, you know, with a couple other guys from a group that you're in.
Host a sober intramural team.
Yeah, like something like that. Like it could be something, you know, maybe it's you making something. Who knows?
Absolutely. Love that idea.
Yeah.
Send us your ideas. If you have an idea of where to start serving, or you have a favorite organization you like working with, or a favorite activity that we haven't mentioned today, we'd love to hear about it. So leave us a comment, whether that's on YouTube or on your streaming app on the episode when it's posted, or it could be on our Facebook or Instagram once we post the episode there. And we'd love to hear from you and hear your story and hear your perspective. That has been episode 10 of season 4. We are chugging right along. We only got 2 more episodes and 2 more months left of 2024 and season 4. Next month, in the month of November, we'll be talking about the topic of respect, which is huge. We're going to be looking at it through a couple different lenses, including respect for yourself, like self-esteem, and respect for others, because that can get difficult, especially when you're going through hard things. Sometimes you can become disrespectful with others. So we're going to talk about the ins and outs of that, tell some stories and ask some good questions, and we look forward to seeing you then. Until then, my name is Chase.
And I'm Mason.
We work for the Willow Center here in Brownsburg. Please take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.